The year was 2347, and humanity had only recently learned that they were not alone in the universe. For centuries, people had looked up at the stars and wondered if there was anyone else out there. They had sent probes into the darkness. They had listened for signals. They had hoped and dreamed and imagined what first contact might be like. When it finally came, it was nothing like they had imagined. Admiral Shaw was 53 years old. He had served in the United Earth Coalition Navy for 30 years. He had commanded destroyers, cruisers, and finally the orbital defense platform known as Sentinel Prime. He had seen many things in his career. He had never seen anything like the ship that appeared in Earth's orbit on that cold Tuesday morning. The vessel was massive. It stretched nearly 15 kilometers from bow to stern. Its hull was dark purple, covered in strange organic patterns that seemed to pulse with inner light. It made everything humanity had ever built look like toys. The International Space Station, still operational after 300 years of continuous upgrades, was barely visible next to this monster. Commander Lisa Morgan stood beside Admiral Shaw on the bridge of Sentinel Prime. She was 41 years old, with auburn hair that she kept tied back in a tight bun. Her eyes were sharp and observant. Right now, those eyes were fixed on the tactical display showing the alien vessel. "Sir, they're hailing us," she said quietly. "All frequencies, they want to talk." Shaw nodded slowly. He had been expecting this. You did not bring a ship that size just to look at the scenery. Put them through. The main flickered to life, and Shaw felt his stomach tight. The creature on the screen was unlike anything from Earth. It stood nearly 3 meters tall, with a body that combined features of a praying mantis and a cobra. Its head was triangular, with compound eyes that glittered like black diamonds. Its arms were long and segmented, ending in hands that had too many fingers. Around its neck hung a small device that hummed softly. When it spoke, the device translated its clicks and hisses into perfect English. "I am High Emissary of the Galactic Council. Your species has been observed." Shaw said nothing. He waited. Continued. "You have developed faster-than-light travel capabilities without Council authorization. This is a violation of Galactic Statute 7749. The Council does not tolerate unauthorized expansion. You will submit to immediate integration into the Council's tributary system." Behind Shaw, Lieutenant Danny Cole shifted nervously. He was young, only 26, and this was his first major assignment. He had never seen an alien before today. He had certainly never been threatened by one. "What exactly does integration mean?" Shaw asked calmly. His mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "You will provide 30% of your planetary resources annually. You will provide 10% of your population for labor distribution across Council space. You will disarm your military completely within one standard cycle, approximately 18 of your months. In exchange, you will receive the protection and guidance of the Council." Shaw felt the anger rising in his chest, but he kept his face neutral. "And if we refuse?" "Refusal is not permitted," said simply. "Compliance is mandatory. Species that resist integration are removed. Their worlds are cleansed. Their history is erased. The Council has governed this region of the galaxy for 12,000 years. We have removed many species who believed they could defy us. You will not be the first. You will not be the last." The transmission ended abruptly. The went dark. For a long moment, no one on the bridge spoke. Then Lieutenant Cole whispered, "They can't be serious. They can't just come here and demand we surrender everything." "They're very serious," Commander Morgan said grimly. "I've been reading the energy signatures from that ship. It's got enough firepower to crack a planet in half." Shaw turned away from his mind was racing, but his voice remained steady. "Get me a secure line to Geneva. President Santos needs to know about this immediately." The news spread across Earth within hours. The Galactic Council's demands were broadcast on every channel, in every language. People watched in shock as the alien emissary explained what humanity must give up. 30% of resources meant poverty for billions. 10% of population meant slavery. Complete disarmament meant helplessness. Panic erupted in cities around the world. Riots broke out in some places. In others, people gathered in churches and temples, praying for deliverance. Stock markets crashed. Governments convened emergency sessions. Military forces were placed on highest alert, though everyone knew their weapons were useless against that massive ship in orbit. President Maria Santos was 61 years old. She had been a lawyer, then a senator, then the leader of the United Earth Coalition. She had dealt with economic crises, territorial disputes, and political scandals. She had never dealt with an alien invasion. She stood in her office in Geneva, looking out the window at the night sky. Somewhere up there, beyond the clouds, that enormous ship was waiting for humanity to surrender. Her chief of staff, a nervous man named, stood behind her. "Madam President, the Council is asking for a response within 48 hours. Our military advisors say we have no chance against them. Maybe we should consider negotiating." Santos turned to face him. Her eyes were hard. "Negotiate? They want to take our resources, enslave our people, and leave us defenseless. What exactly would we negotiate? Perhaps they would accept a smaller tribute. Perhaps we could delay the disarmament, buy ourselves time." Santos shook her head slowly. "Time for what? To watch them drain us dry year after year? To watch our children be taken away to work in alien factories? That's not survival, that's slow death." She walked to her desk and pressed a button on her console. "Get me General Hayes. Tell her it's time." Looked confused. "Time for what, Madam President?" Santos smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Time to show these aliens what humanity is really capable of." 3 hours later, President Santos addressed the world. She stood in the Great Hall of the United Nations, surrounded by flags from every nation on Earth. Cameras broadcast her image to every screen on the planet. "People of Earth," she began, "we have received the Galactic Council's demands. They want us to surrender our freedom, our resources, and our future. They believe we are weak. They believe we are primitive. They believe we will kneel." She paused, letting her words sink in. "They are wrong. For over a century, humanity has known this day might come. We have prepared. We have built. We have waited. The Council sees us as easy prey, another species to be conquered and exploited. They do not know what we have hidden. They do not know what we are capable of." Her voice rose, filling the hall. "We will not surrender. We will not kneel. We will show the galaxy that humanity bows to no one." Around the world, people watched. Some were afraid. Some were skeptical. But many felt something else stirring in their hearts, something that had been sleeping for a long time. Hope. And deep beneath the mountains, in facilities that officially did not exist, machines began to wake up. General Hayes was 64 years old. She had gray hair cut short in military style and a face lined with decades of hard decisions. She had commanded troops in 3 different conflicts. She had buried friends and enemies alike, but her most important work had never been seen by the public. For the past 20 years, she had been the director of a project so secret that fewer than 1,000 people on Earth knew it existed. They called it the Forge. The entrance was hidden in a valley deep in the Rocky Mountains. From the outside, it looked like an abandoned mining operation. There were rusty buildings, broken equipment, and warning signs about unsafe conditions. Nobody ever came here. Nobody had any reason to. But beneath those rusty buildings, carved into the heart of the mountain, was the most advanced military facility ever built by human hands. General Hayes led Dr. Samuel Price through endless corridors of polished steel and humming machinery. Dr. Price was 57 years old, thin and balding, with glasses that he constantly pushed up his nose. He looked like a college professor, not a weapons designer, but appearances were deceiving. Samuel Price had invented technologies that would have seemed like magic to previous generations. "The Council thinks we discovered faster-than-light travel 20 years ago," Hayes said as they walked. "That's what our public records show. That's what we wanted them to think." "And the truth?" Price asked, though he already knew the answer. "We cracked FTL over a century ago. In 2241, one of our deep space probes intercepted fragments of Council transmissions. It took us 40 years to decode them, but what we found changed everything. They passed through a massive door into a chamber that stretched for kilometers in every direction. The ceiling was so high that it was lost in shadow, and filling that enormous space were ships, hundreds of them, sleek, angular vessels painted in dark gray, each one bristling with weapons and sensors. Dr. Price had seen this fleet many times, but it still took his breath away. 600 warships, Hayes said proudly. Each one more advanced than anything the Council has fielded in 10,000 years. They've grown complacent, you see. When you rule the galaxy for that long, you stop innovating. You stop trying. You assume nobody will ever challenge you. She led him to a smaller chamber where a single device sat on a pedestal. It looked like a black sphere, about the size of a basketball, with no visible seams or markings. "Tell me about this again," Hayes said. "The President will want details." Price nodded and adjusted his glasses. "We call it the nullifier. It generates a localized field that destabilizes molecular bonds. Anything within the field simply falls apart at the atomic level. Metal, plastic, organic matter, it doesn't matter. Everything just stops holding together." "Range?" "About 500 meters per charge. We've built them in various sizes. The largest can affect an area nearly 2 kilometers wide." Hayes smiled grimly. "And the Council ships, their shields?" "Their shields are designed to stop energy weapons and kinetic impacts. They've never encountered anything like this. The nullifier field passes right through their defenses." They continued through the facility, passing laboratories where scientists worked on technologies that would revolutionize warfare. Engineers were assembling fighter craft that could outmaneuver anything in the galaxy. Programmers were writing code for artificial intelligence systems that could coordinate thousands of ships in perfect synchronization. "How do we keep this secret?" Price asked. "A project this big for over 100 years. How did nobody find out?" Hayes stopped walking and turned to face him. "Because everyone involved understood what was at stake. The Council has destroyed hundreds of species, Doctor. Not conquered, destroyed. Wiped from existence. Every man and woman who works in these facilities knows that if we fail, humanity dies. That kind of motivation keeps people quiet." She resumed walking, her boots echoing on the metal floor. "We also learned from the Council's own transmissions. We know how they think. We know their tactics. They send scouts to new species, usually disguised as traders or explorers. Those scouts report back on military strength, technological level, and likelihood of resistance. Based on those reports, the Council decides whether to demand tribute or simply destroy the species before they become a threat. And they send scouts to Earth." "Oh yes, 3 times over the past century. Each time, we showed them exactly what we wanted them to see. Primitive ships with basic weapons. Disorganized militaries squabbling over territory. A species too busy fighting itself to pose any danger." Price understood now. "We played weak so they would underestimate us." "Exactly. The Council has a pattern. They always send overwhelming force to demand tribute, but they don't expect real resistance. Why would they? Nobody has successfully resisted them in 12,000 years. They've forgotten what a real fight looks like." They reached the command center, a massive room filled with holographic displays and communication equipment. Officers in crisp uniforms monitored stations, tracking everything from satellite positions to energy readings from the Council ship in orbit. President Santos was already there, along with Admiral Shaw and Commander Morgan. They had arrived by underground transport an hour earlier. The president looked tired but determined. "General Hayes," Santos said, "show me what we have." Hayes activated the main display. A three-dimensional map of the solar system appeared, with Earth at the center. The council ship was marked as a red dot in high orbit. "Madam President, our fleet is currently hidden in bases across the solar system. We have facilities on the Moon, Mars, and several asteroids. On your command, we can have all 600 ships in Earth orbit within 30 minutes." Shaw studied the display. "What about their reinforcements? That emissary said the Council has ruled for 12,000 years. They must have thousands of ships." "Millions, actually," Hayes replied. "But they're spread across the entire galaxy. The nearest major Council fleet is approximately 3 weeks away at their best speed. They sent 1,200 ships with the emissary, assuming that would be more than enough for a primitive species." "And with our technology?" Santos asked. Dr. Price stepped forward. "Our Cascade drive folds space instead of bending it. Where their ships take weeks to cross the galaxy, ours can do it in hours. If they call for reinforcements, we can intercept them long before they arrive." Santos nodded slowly. She walked to the display and stared at the red dot representing the Council ship. For a long moment, she said nothing. "All my life," she finally said, "I believed that humanity's greatest achievement was learning to work together. After centuries of war and division, we finally united. We built a world government. We ended poverty and disease. We reached for the stars." She turned to face the others. "I will not let some alien empire take that away. I will not let them turn us into slaves." She straightened her shoulders, and her voice grew strong. "General Hayes, prepare the fleet. Admiral Shaw, you will lead our forces. We will give the Council one chance to leave peacefully. If they refuse, we will show them exactly what humanity is capable of." Shaw saluted crisply. "Yes, Madam President." As the officers rushed to their stations, preparing for a battle that would decide the fate of humanity, Price felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement. He had spent his entire career building weapons of unimaginable power. Now he would see if they worked. In orbit above Earth, High Emissary waited patiently. He had done this many times before. The primitives always made noise at first. They always talked about resistance and defiance. But in the end, they always surrendered. It was the natural order of things. He had no idea that beneath his feet, an entire civilization was waking up. An entire species was preparing for war. And nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. High Emissary stood in the command chamber of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. The ship was ancient by human standards, nearly 6,000 years old, but the Council built things to last. Its walls were covered in trophies from conquered worlds, bones and artifacts and flags from species that no longer existed. Liked to look at them when he was bored. They reminded him of his purpose. His aide, a smaller creature of the same species named, approached with a data tablet. "Emissary, the humans have requested to respond to our demands. They wish to transmit a message." Clicked his mandibles in satisfaction. Already, it has only been 16 hours. They usually take longer to accept defeat. He settled into his command throne, a massive chair carved from the bones of some long-dead creature. "Very well, let us hear their surrender." They activated and saw the human leader again. President Santos stood in a large room filled with military officers. Behind her, screens displayed tactical information that did not bother to examine. What did it matter what the primitives were planning? They had nothing that could threaten the Council. "High Emissary," Santos began, her voice calm and steady. "We have reviewed your demands carefully." "And you accept?" asked. "Wise, your species may yet survive." Santos shook her head slowly. "No, Emissary, we do not accept. We find your demands completely unacceptable." For a moment was too surprised to respond. In 400 years of service to the Council, no species had ever directly refused him. Some had tried to negotiate. Some had begged for mercy, but outright refusal, it was unthinkable. "You do not understand your position," he said, his translator giving his voice a dangerous edge. "I have 1,200 warships in this system. Each one carries weapons that could destroy your largest cities in seconds. Your entire species could be erased in a matter of days. You have no choice but to submit." "Actually," Santos replied, "we do have a choice. We always have a choice, and we choose to fight." Leaned close to and whispered, "Emissary, perhaps they are bluffing. Perhaps they hope we will negotiate." Ignored him. His compound eyes studied the human female carefully. There was something in her expression that troubled him. She did not look afraid. She did not look desperate. She looked confident. Nobody about to be conquered should look that confident. "You are making a terrible mistake," said. "The Council has destroyed thousands of species who thought they could resist. Your primitive weapons cannot harm our shields. Your tiny ships cannot match our firepower. You will die, and your world will be reduced to ash." Santos smiled slightly. "I thought you might say something like that." She stepped aside, and the camera focused on a human male in a military uniform. "Admiral Shaw, please show our guest what he's facing." Admiral Shaw activated a holographic display. "Emissary, what you're seeing is the current position of your fleet. 1,200 vessels spread across this system in standard patrol formation. You're confident because you've done this before. You've crushed species who couldn't fight back." The display suddenly changed. New icons appeared, hundreds of them, surrounding the Council fleet completely. "And this," Shaw said, "is our fleet." His eyes widened. That was impossible. His scouts had reported the humans possessed fewer than 50 ships, all of them primitive and poorly armed. What he was seeing now was something else entirely. 600 vessels, arranged in perfect formation, each one reading as heavily armed on his tactical displays. "This is a trick," he hissed. "Your sensors are feeding us false data." "No trick," Shaw replied. "What you're seeing is real. We've been preparing for this moment for over 100 years. While your scouts watched us play with basic technology, we were building something else, something better." Turned to his tactical officer, "Confirm this, now." The officer worked frantically at his console, then looked up with fear in his eyes. "Emissary, our sensors are detecting 612 vessels. Energy signatures suggest advanced weaponry. They appeared out of nowhere, using some form of spatial displacement we've never seen before." Stepped back from the throne, his own eyes darting nervously. "This is not possible. They should not have this technology. Our scouts said nothing about this." "Your scouts saw what we wanted them to see," Santos said, her voice cutting through the chamber like a blade. "You've spent 12,000 years bullying younger species, Emissary, taking what you wanted, destroying anyone who resisted. You became arrogant. You stopped paying attention. You forgot what it means to face someone who actually fights back." His mind was racing. This changed everything. If the humans truly had this level of technology, his fleet was in serious danger. But he could not retreat. To retreat without completing his mission would mean disgrace, possibly death. The Council did not tolerate failure. "Even if your fleet is real," he said slowly, "you are still outnumbered. We have 1,200 ships to your 600. The mathematics of war favor us." Admiral Shaw laughed, and it was not a pleasant sound. "Mathematics? Let me explain some mathematics to you, Emissary. Your ships are ancient. Your weapons technology hasn't changed in. You've never needed to innovate because nobody could challenge you." He leaned forward, his eyes hard. "Our ships are new. Our weapons are new. We've spent a century studying your technology and building something better." "You're bluffing," said, but even he could hear the uncertainty in his own voice. President Santos stepped back into the frame. "We're not bluffing, Emissary. We're giving you a chance. One chance. Take your fleet and leave our system. Return to the Council and tell them that Earth is not a world to be conquered. Tell them that humanity is not a species to be enslaved. Do this, and no one needs to die today." His claws tightened on the arms of his throne. His pride screamed at him to attack, to prove that the Council was still supreme. But something else was whispering in his mind, something he had not felt in centuries. Doubt. "And if we refuse?" he asked. Santos' expression hardened. Her voice dropped to something cold and final. "Then you will learn what happens to those who threaten humanity. You have 1 hour to withdraw. If a single Council ship remains in our system after that time, we will open fire. And we will not stop until every one of your vessels is destroyed." She paused, and in that silence felt the weight of history pressing down on him. Something was changing, something fundamental. Santos spoke her final words clearly, making sure every being in the Council fleet could hear them. "Run or face total destruction." The transmission ended. Sat in silence for a long moment. Around him, his officers waited for orders. Some looked afraid, others looked angry, all of them looked uncertain. "Emissary," said quietly, "perhaps we should consider a tactical withdrawal. We could return with a larger fleet, more ships, overwhelming force." "No," his voice was firm now. His doubt had been replaced by something else, something familiar: pride, anger, the absolute certainty that the Council could not be defeated by primitives. "We attack. These humans are bluffing, they must be. No species has ever stood against us. No species ever will." He rose from his throne and pointed at the tactical display. "All ships, battle formation. We will crush these insects and burn their world to ash. Let this be a lesson to any who would defy the Galactic Council." His orders went out across the fleet. 1,200 ships began to move, forming into attack patterns that had been used for. And on the human ships, alarms began to sound. The battle for Earth was about to begin. Captain had been waiting for this moment her entire life. She was 45 years old, with short black hair and eyes that had seen more than their share of combat. She had commanded ships in border skirmishes and pirate hunts, but nothing like this. Nothing that truly mattered. Now she stood on the bridge of the battleship Defiance, the flagship of the human fleet, and watched 1,200 enemy vessels arrange themselves for attack. Her crew moved with practiced efficiency around her. They were scared, she knew. Everyone was scared, but they were also ready. "Lieutenant Santos," she said to her weapons officer, a young man of 28 with steady hands and a calm voice, "Status report." Greg Santos checked his displays. "All weapons charged and ready, Captain. Nullifier rounds loaded. Targeting systems online." "Navigation." Lieutenant Amy Porter responded from her station. "Cascade drive standing by for tactical jumps. We can reposition on your command." Nodded, she activated the fleet-wide communication channel. "All ships, this is Captain. The Council has chosen to fight. They believe we are weak. They believe we are primitive. They believe this will be easy." She paused. "Let's prove them wrong." Across the fleet, 600 ships waited for orders. Men and women from every nation on Earth sat at their stations, their hands hovering over controls, their hearts pounding in their chests. They were about to make history, one way or another. Admiral Shaw's voice came through the command channel from Sentinel Prime, where he was coordinating the overall battle. "Council fleet is advancing. First wave estimated to reach weapons range in 2 minutes. All ships, weapons free on my command." On the Eternal Dominion, High Emissary watched his fleet surge forward. 400 ships in the first wave, moving in the classic Council attack formation. It had worked 1,000 times before. It would work again. "Target their largest ships first," he ordered. "Once we destroy their command vessels, the rest will scatter." The Council ships opened fire. Brilliant blue plasma bolts streaked across the void of space. Kinetic rounds, massive slugs of dense metal, hurtled toward the human fleet at incredible speeds. It was a wall of destruction that should have torn the primitive vessels apart. The human ships didn't move. Captain watched the incoming fire on her tactical display. The plasma bolts were 30 seconds away. 20, 10. Now, she said quietly. The Defiance vanished. It didn't explode or break apart. It simply ceased to exist in one location and appeared in another, 300 kilometers away, behind the Council formation. Every human ship did the same thing at the same moment. The wall of plasma and kinetic rounds passed through empty space where the fleet had been moments before. His compound eyes widened in shock. What happened? Where did they go? They jumped, his tactical officer stammered. Some kind of instantaneous spatial displacement. They're behind us now. Before could respond, the human fleet opened fire. The nullifier rounds crossed the void in silence. They were small, each one no bigger than a human fist, but they carried destruction beyond anything the Council had ever faced. When they struck Council ships, there were no explosions. Instead, the vessels simply fell apart. Hulls that had withstood plasma and kinetic impacts for thousands of years suddenly lost cohesion. Metal became dust. Systems that had operated ceased to function. Living beings that had conquered worlds became nothing. In the first 30 seconds of combat, 200 Council ships were erased from existence. No whispered, "This is not possible." But it was happening. His tactical display was filling with loss indicators as ship after ship went dark. Vessels that had been pride of the Council fleet were dissolving like ice in water. Crews that had served for centuries were dying without even understanding what was killing them. "Return fire," screamed. All ships returned fire. The Council fleet unleashed everything they had. Plasma batteries, kinetic cannons, missile systems that had been designed to crack planets. The combined firepower of 1,000 warships converged on the human fleet. And hit nothing. The human ships were moving constantly, using their cascade drives to make short jumps that were impossible to predict. They would appear, fire, and vanish before the Council weapons could reach them. It was like trying to swat flies with a hammer. On the carrier constellation, Commander Victor Grant coordinated the fighter squadrons. 2,000 interceptors, small and impossibly fast, swept through the Council formation like a storm. They targeted command ships, sensor arrays, communication nodes. Everywhere they struck, coordination collapsed. "Alpha Squadron hit that battleship's engines," Grant ordered. "Beta Squadron take out their flag carrier's communication array. We need them blind and confused." The fighters were armed with smaller versions of the nullifier technology. They couldn't destroy whole ships, but they could disable critical systems. Council vessels found themselves unable to communicate, unable to coordinate, unable to fight effectively. Captain pushed the Defiance into the heart of the enemy formation. Around her, the bridge crew worked with desperate efficiency. "Multiple targets port side," Lieutenant Santos reported. 3 cruisers trying to form a defensive line. "Hit them," ordered. The Defiance fired a full salvo. 3 cruisers, each one larger than any ship Earth had possessed a century ago, came apart simultaneously. Their debris scattered across space, joining the growing field of destruction. Watched his fleet dying around him. Ships that had conquered worlds were being swatted like insects. Commanders who had served for centuries were being silenced forever. The pride of the Galactic Council was being dismantled by a species they had dismissed as primitive. "Emissary," said urgently, "we must retreat. We've lost over 400 ships already. If we stay, we'll be annihilated." "We cannot retreat," hissed. "The Council does not retreat." The Council has never faced anything like this. An explosion rocked the Eternal Dominion as a nullifier round struck one of the secondary hulls. Systems failed across the ship. Lights flickered. The artificial gravity wavered. "Hull breach in sectors 7 through 12, an officer reported. "Weapons systems offline, shields failing." Looked at his tactical display. He had started this battle with 1,200 ships. Now he had fewer than 600, and that number was dropping every second. The humans had lost perhaps 20 vessels, and most of those were fighters. For the first time in 400 years of service, felt something he had never felt before. Fear. All ships, he said, his voice hollow, retreat. Fall back to the edge of the system. Emergency speed. The surviving council ships broke formation and fled. They scattered in every direction, trying desperately to escape the nightmare that was consuming them. Some made it. Many did not. The human fleet pursued relentlessly, picking off stragglers, ensuring that the message would be clear. Earth was not to be conquered. 4 hours after the battle began, it was over. The Council Armada had been reduced from 1,200 ships to fewer than 100, all of them damaged, all of them fleeing toward the edge of the solar system. The space around Earth was filled with debris, the remains of vessels that had once terrorized the galaxy. On the bridge of the Defiance, Captain finally allowed herself to breathe. Her hands were shaking. Her uniform was soaked with sweat, but she was alive. They were all alive. "We did it," Lieutenant Santos said quietly, disbelief in his voice. "We actually did it." Nodded slowly. "Yes, we did." Admiral Shaw's voice came through the communication system, addressing the entire fleet. "All ships, stand down from combat stations. The enemy is retreating. Today, we have done something that no one in 12,000 years has accomplished. We have defeated the Galactic Council." Across the fleet, cheers erupted. Men and women who had faced death together celebrated their survival. On Earth, people watched the battle recordings and wept with joy. But knew this was only the beginning. The Council would not accept this defeat. They would return with more ships, more weapons, more determination to crush the species that had humiliated them. Humanity had won the battle. The war was just starting. The news traveled faster than light. It spread through communication networks that had connected the galaxy for thousands of years. It passed from world to world, from species to species, from slave to slave. The message was simple, but its meaning was revolutionary. Earth had the Galactic Council. Earth had won. On Prime, a world that had been strip-mined for 3,000 years, workers in the resource extraction pits stopped their machines and gathered around communication screens. They watched recordings of human ships destroying council vessels. They saw the massive fleet that had conquered their ancestors dissolve into dust. Some of them wept. Others simply stared in silence, unable to process what they were seeing. On 7, the last surviving members of the Thorn species huddled in labor camps, working to produce goods for council markets. They had once numbered in the billions. Now there were fewer than 1,000,000 left, their culture erased, their history forgotten. When they saw what humanity had done, something stirred in their hearts, something that had been dead for centuries. Hope. On countless worlds across the galaxy, species that had been crushed under the Council's boot watched the recordings and began to wonder. If humans could resist, could they? If one primitive species could defeat the Council's fleet, what might happen if multiple species rose together? President Maria Santos understood this. 3 days after the battle, she addressed not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. Her message was broadcast on every frequency the Council had ever used. She stood in the Great Hall of the United Nations, the same place where she had announced humanity's resistance. But now the mood was different. Now there was triumph in the air. "People of the galaxy," she began, "for 12,000 years the Galactic Council has ruled through fear. They have taken what they wanted. They have destroyed what they couldn't control. They have called this order. They have called this civilization." She paused, letting her words reach across the stars. It was neither, it was tyranny, and today that tyranny faces its end. Earth does not seek empire. We do not want tribute. We do not demand submission. What we offer is something the Council never could: a choice, a chance to live free, a chance to determine your own future. Any species that wishes to stand with us is welcome. Any species that wishes to remain neutral will be respected. We will not force anyone to join our cause. That is what the Council does. We are not the Council." Her voice hardened. "But any power that threatens the innocent, that enslaves the weak, that believes might alone makes right, will find humanity standing in their path. We will protect those who cannot protect themselves. We will fight for those who have forgotten how to fight." She leaned forward, her eyes blazing with determination. "We will not be conquered, we will not be controlled, and we will never again allow others to suffer what the Council has inflicted." In the weeks that followed, the response exceeded anything humanity had hoped for. First came their ambassador, a being of flowing silver light, arrived in Earth orbit requesting audience with President Santos. They had once been among the most advanced species in the galaxy, before the Council had subjugated them. Now they wanted to share what remained of their technology and knowledge. Then came a species of brilliant engineers who had been forced to build Council warships for centuries. They brought designs, blueprints, knowledge of Council weaknesses that they had secretly preserved despite the risk of execution. Then came the Thorn, the Selenites, the Void Walkers, and dozens more. Species that had been planning rebellions for generations but had lacked the power to succeed. Now they saw humanity as the catalyst they had been waiting for. Admiral Shaw oversaw the integration of Allied forces into the human fleet. It was challenging work. Different species had different technologies, different tactics, different ways of thinking about warfare. But slowly, a unified force began to take shape. "We're calling it the Free Systems Alliance," Shaw told President Santos during a strategy meeting. 17 species so far, with more expressing interest every day. Our combined fleet now numbers over 2,000 ships. "And the Council?" Santos asked. Shaw's expression darkened. "They're regrouping in their core systems. Our intelligence suggests they're assembling the largest fleet in their history. They can't let our rebellion succeed. If we win, every tributary species in the galaxy might rise up." General Hayes spread tactical maps across the table. "They'll come for Earth first. It's symbolic. The world that started the rebellion. If they can destroy us, they think the alliance will collapse." "Will it?" Santos asked. Hayes considered the question carefully. "Honestly, I don't know. What I do know is that we can't let it come to that. We need to take the fight to them before they're ready." Dr. Samuel Price entered the meeting room, looking exhausted but excited. He had been working around the clock since the battle, combining human technology with knowledge provided by their new allies. "I have good news," he said. "They have helped us miniaturize the Cascade drive. We can now install it in fighter craft, and they have shared their knowledge of energy manipulation. Our next generation of nullifier weapons will be 3 times more powerful." Santos nodded slowly. "How long until we're ready for a major offensive?" 6 months, maybe less if we push hard." 6 months. It was a short time to prepare for a war that would determine the fate of the galaxy, but humanity had faced impossible odds before. On Earth, celebrations continued even as preparations for war accelerated. People danced in the streets, celebrating their survival, their victory, their sudden importance in a universe that had seemed so vast and indifferent just weeks before. In London, a grandmother told her stories about the battle, about the brave men and women who had piloted the ships that saved humanity. In Tokyo, engineers worked through the night to build more vessels for the growing fleet. In Lagos, young people lined up at recruitment centers, eager to serve in the military that had proven humanity's worth. And in a small office in Geneva, President Santos sat alone, looking out at the night sky. Commander Lisa Morgan found her there, hours after the strategy meeting had ended. Santos didn't turn around as Morgan entered. "You should get some rest, Madam President," Morgan said quietly. Santos smiled slightly. Rest, I've forgotten what that feels like. She pointed at a star near the horizon. Do you see that one? According to our new star charts, there's a species living there called the Quiet Ones. They've been under council control for 8,000 years. 8,000 years of slavery and oppression. And now they're sending messages, asking if the stories are true. Asking if there's really a species called humans who fight for freedom. Morgan stood beside her, following her gaze. What did you tell them? She asked. I told them the truth. That we're scared, we're outnumbered, and we might fail. But we're going to fight anyway. Because some things are worth fighting for, even if you might lose. She turned to face Morgan. That's what makes us human, isn't it? We fight even when the odds are against us. We hope even when hope seems foolish. We dream even when our dreams seem impossible. Morgan nodded slowly. And now the galaxy is learning that about us. Santos looked back at the stars. Yes, she said softly, they are. Far across the galaxy, High Emissary stood before the Council of Elders. He had been disgraced, stripped of his rank, his trophies taken from him. But he had been allowed to live for now because he was the only one who had faced the humans and survived. They are not what we expected, he told the gathered leaders. They are cunning, they are determined, and they are not alone anymore. Species we have controlled for are rallying to their cause. The Grand Elder, an ancient being of immense power, stirred in his throne. Then we will crush them all, he said. We will assemble a fleet of 10,000 ships. We will burn their worlds. We will erase their histories. We will make an example so terrible that no species will ever again think of defiance. Bowed his head, as you command, Elder. But as he left the chamber, he felt something he had never felt before. Uncertainty. He had seen what humans could do. He had watched his fleet dissolve around him. He had looked into the eyes of that human president and seen something terrifying. Conviction. The Council had ruled for 12,000 years. They had destroyed countless species. They had seemed invincible. But the universe was changing. A small blue world had taught it to hope again. And nothing would ever be the same.